the wonderful Elma Smit, who I have said I have hounded repeatedly to be here, and but it has paid off, and I'm delighted you could join us, Elma. Um, Elma first came to my attention, and I'm sorry to say I've been living here for 25 years, so I suppose didn't catch you when you were on SuperSport, when you were in 2011 the first woman to report on rugby on TV in South Africa. I mean, if you said 2011 was just the other day, actually,
Yeah,
as well.
yeah.
And women, what do they know about rugby, hey? Oh. Anyway, so I was delighted when I came across the podcast, The Good Discuss the Rugby, and the reporting on the Women's World Cup. It just was so from the heart, and I just thought we need to get you on here. Yes, so obviously 2011, first woman reported on rugby. You obviously saw that this is the world needs women to be in sport, and that really kind of opened your eyes as to kind of what's wrong with this whole reporting on sport thing. And women's football, women's rugby found you, and it obviously created a very special place in your heart. So I'm so glad you're here. Today you're going to talk to us about, the growth, what the growth in women's rugby can teach us about overlooked audiences, brand building, and investing early in women's sports, and also the opportunities that the September fixture of the Springboks versus Wales women is going to give the South African business community in the UK, and the opportunities that that brings. So, Elma, I'm going to keep quiet now. Thank goodness. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Tanya. I really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone who've joined. Thank you for having me. Yes, as Tanya said, I've spent most of my career telling stories about rugby and about South Africa. Before I worked in rugby in 2011, I worked at 5FM and for a music channel called MCAR. And I really thought I knew what my career was going to be. It was going to be music and lifestyle and entertainment. And rugby sort of found me, not the other way around. So I definitely can't take any credit for having seen the future in some way, shape, or form. I just had a really great opportunity to smash a glass ceiling, which I grabbed. And I was the first woman to report on a Rugby World Cup for SuperSport and was blessed to do really interesting work in an early phase, introducing more user-generated content and loads of digital ideas. And this has, via loads of byways, led me to the work that I do today, which is, I would classify it as two things, but it's all about turning good content into great business on a deadline. In my day job, I work with the British and Irish Lions to produce all of their own channel content, documentary content, partner content. So basically turning their entire story into great content in collaboration with their partners, and delivered the men's series last year and also the 21 men's series out in South Africa just before I moved over. And we got an Emmy nomination, international Emmy nomination for the documentary that we made on that series. So that's pretty much what brought me to the UK. But I've watched women's rugby evolve from something people believed needed to be kind of like supported, like a charity project, into something that audiences really are choosing actively, not because they are men's rugby fans, but just because they like this product, and something businesses should be competing to understand, because there's a small window here, and it's a bit like in 2020 in lockdown when people were baking banana bread and doing TikTok, and your kids were doing TikTok dances, and you thought they were ridiculous. And now that's the platform that offers, like the kind of algorithmic growth that you don't see anywhere else. I started a women's rugby podcast called The Good, the Scaz, and the Rugby in 21 when I was still in South Africa with double Rugby World Cup winners Emily Scarrett, and then later Mo Hunt joined us. And today that's a big part of what I focus a lot of my attention on. In business, I think the greatest opportunity usually exists before everybody sees its value. Like the opportunity to work in rugby existed before I saw the value in it. But once a market is established, then the rights become really expensive really quickly, and the sponsorship categories become crowded. And as a brand, you really battle to stand out because the competition is so strong. And I think right now there's a tiny window where women's sport offers you that increasingly rare moment where it's just before this market goes boom. There's less commercial clutter, there's more emotional engagement, and you can really shape what it looks like. And I mean, you don't have to take my word for this. Let's look at the recent 2026 Guinness Women's Six Nations. The total attendance across the championship was 280,000. Now, you might think that's not a big number, but it was 150 last year. So it's almost doubled year on year. The England opening match against Ireland at Allianz Stadium in Twickenham in front of 77,120 people set a new attendance record. That's about as many people as the ones who watched the just recent FIFA World Cup final, by the way. Scotland then in the next week hosted England at Murrayfield for the first time. And I hosted an event for Ticketmaster in the week after and asked the head of ticketing for Scottish Rugby, Janice Roddy, what was the max number of people you had pulled to a Scottish women's match before this? And she said 7K. And I said, what was your target for this event? And she said 21K. And they pulled 30,498 people into Murrayfield Stadium, which is a number none of them could have foreseen. And I said to her, the thing that I found fascinating in the week between those two matches is that someone who works for England Rugby posted that 49% of those 77,000 people that they got in week one were first-time ticket buyers. These are not people that have been to Allianz Stadium in Twickenham before. What was your number of first-time ticket buyers? And she smiled and she said, we were close to 60% first-time ticket buyers. And I said, are these people, were they coming north from England? Are they England fans just coming into Scotland? And she said, no, they were primarily Scottish fans and not from Edinburgh. They were from all over the country. So this is a whole new audience that we're now wrapping our heads around. Like, who are these people and what is it that they turn up for? About like and the thing that I think that's interesting here, the assumption that we make is that sport is good when it's competitive. 1 point is enough. The Springboks won by 1 point in every round of the knockout matches of the Rugby World Cup in 23, and that's what made the win so sweet. And yes, this is a standard that, according to research, is really important for viewers over 35 and particularly male viewers. But there's this agency in New York called Barbarian who did a load of research around women's sport, and especially women's sports audiences who are female and who are under 35. And for them, competitiveness is like third. So in Scotland and England, case, that match at Murrayfield, the final score was 84-7, and nobody expected Scotland was going to win that. So those 30,000 people who went there didn't go thinking that it was going to be a competitive match, that it was going to be closely fought. And the 77,000 people who came to watch Ireland against England at Allianz Stadium in week one also didn't come thinking that this was going to be a 1-point decision. The product in women's sport isn't about the scoreboard. People are buying access to elite athletes who offer a welcoming live experience and a feeling of participating in cultural change that is a lot more values-led. If you've ever looked at Ilona Maher, who is the most followed person in all of rugby, the reason she has a ton of followers is not because the USA women's team have won more Rugby World Cups than anyone. They've only won one. The first one. She's not played when she played for Bristol Bears for the 3 times champions of the PWR. She played for the other team. She's not the best player in her position in the world. She's not popular because she plays in closely fought competitive matches or she plays for the best team in the world. She's popular because her audience wants to hear her story. They want to understand her body positive motivations and the fact that she's looking for a boyfriend and all of these crazy places she goes, and her personality being on full show makes people feel welcome in her life. And I think when your ticket buyers are mostly new, when your ticket buyers are mostly turning up for the people, not the scoreboard, then we need to change how we activate around that. And we often assume that women's sport must be perfectly competitive before it will be commercially useful. But the audience behavior is telling us something completely different, because competitive balance matters over time. And I think that we might generally move towards competitiveness becoming a higher ranked standard in the women's game. But at the moment, it feels important and significant for a different reason. Women's rugby doesn't have an interest problem. In many markets, it's a visibility and a storytelling and an infrastructure problem that is underpinned by assumptions that don't bear out in reality. So I think for the Springbok women, they already possess something super strong, which is the national identity and a level of authenticity and resilience and clear transformation. That job's already done. They've got powerful personal stories. So many of them have huge, unbelievable kind of rags to riches, transformational examples and case studies that they can offer. But they also offer you a direct connection to a very wide number of communities in South Africa. What they don't have is the consistency of commercial and media coverage that the men have. They need more regular storytelling. They need greater player recognition. They need more promotion between matches. And they need businesses bringing their customers and their communities on the journey, building case studies, because I think that in this country, we've seen what women's sport can do. But in South Africa, the buy-in isn't quite there yet. There are green shoots, and there are a few examples, but not prominent enough case studies that makes South African businesses feel like they understand what this opportunity looks like. And I think if you're running a business in the UK, you're sitting at that intersection of having a great potential brand here that a lot of people haven't woken up to yet, and enough understanding and case study and research. The Women's Sports Trust report that recently came out, it has like a wealth of data in it around the visibility of women's sport. So I would recommend you look at that. But business can definitely contribute and leverage the opportunity, around everything from customer communication and corporate ticket purchases to travel support and venues and technology and content funding and distribution and more introductions to more partners. We've taken the leap to take ownership of the podcast that we make. So Emily Scarrett Mohand, myself, and our producer, Shara Kilgallen, have pretty much been on the payroll of a bigger company for the last 5 years making this podcast. And it kind of got to a point where we felt like we have an established audience, we've got trusted relationships, we've got credibility in the game, and we can see this thing shaping and moving in ways that I feel like sometimes a lot of people aren't quite aware of yet. And there are opportunities here that we can only unlock because we are female-led, because we are majority player-owned, value that we can offer. Even rights holders and governing bodies sometimes are still trying to wrap their heads around when that 60% new ticket buyer comes in, what it is that they generally really respond to and what they're buying. We want to collaborate around original content because we believe that in rugby, every body matters, and we need to teach more women and girls at crucial phases of their development that there is no such thing as a body type that doesn't add value to the whole. Rugby is a very practical manifestation of the fact that you can be short or tall, strong or skinny. There is a role here that you can practically play. But also in the way that we play in the South African women's game, if you haven't watched it before, it's wild because all they want to do is scrum. They're obsessed with the physicality of the game. And they scrum even when we are screaming at the TV to stop scrumming. And they do all kinds of incredibly rogue things. But they play with such deep and innate bravery that they scare the living daylights out of other teams, because they say these women just step onto the pitch with a level of ferocity that we can't match, we can't meet, we've never had to encounter or out puzzle before. And I think that projects connecting women's rugby across business, but also across South Africa and the UK, is a very specific opportunity. And I think that that's why when the Springbok women play Wales, this is going to potentially be a really big win for the Springbok women. I think they're targeting that match. They're playing the Black Ferns in South Africa for the first time ever before this. And I don't think that we are there against the Ferns yet, but against Wales, this is a really big opportunity. We beat Italy during the Women's Rugby World Cup last autumn, and the leaps and bounds that they have grown by in what we saw in the series against the USA on South African soil recently, which ended up 1-1, shows the Springbok women are already doing the difficult part. They are training, they are competing, they are representing, and they're doing it earning far, far, far less than their male counterparts. And the only thing that they did wrong was to be born a female. That's literally it. It was the accident of birth. That meant that Babal Walacha is never going to be the kind of remunerated player that Tendai Mtawarira is. But I think your part is really easy. You can watch them, you can talk about them, you can bring people to watch with you, and you can help build that commercial ecosystem around them. So come and see them in Wales in September. And if you want to explore how content and partnership and collaboration helps build that mountain ever higher so those who come after us can see further, then I think the time is now. The team's ready.
Fantastic. Amazing, Elma. Thank you so much. And you can see why I thought she was so inspirational. Go on. Any questions for Elma?
Hi, Emma. Thanks. That was really inspirational. I really enjoy watching women's sport, the football and the rugby, and I think it's really grown. It's interesting in the UK now. I wonder whether women's sport is related more to competitiveness, because if the England women's team wasn't doing so well, then I wonder whether audiences would watch them. So whether they've gone over that crest, I don't know. But it'd be interesting to know the male-female split that watch female rugby and football. I mean, of those ticket sales you mentioned, was there any gender splits in those, or is it really? I mean, I watch women's sport, but I mean, I probably wouldn't pay to go to a match, but I enjoy watching it on TV. So were the people actually attending predominantly women? I mean, I guess sponsors are thinking they're mainly, women's type sponsoring.
It's interesting, Adrian, that this data shifts the whole time. So initially it was largely men, and it was you were speaking to a niche section of the male rugby fan base who then would also watch women's rugby. But these were the people who were not tapped out on the immense volume of men's rugby already and were like there for more. But this has shifted over into being a much more, it's a very family-led product now. So the average size of the group that goes to a women's rugby match it's quite a collective viewing experience, but it's not 9 blokes going together. It's usually family units. It's mixed groups of friends. So it'll be multiple parents and multiple children together. What we definitely anecdotally saw quite a bit on the Women's Six Nations when we were walking down from the Cabbage Patch to Allianz Stadium, we were stopped once or twice by people who follow the pod who said, Alma, we had these people on the train with us who've only ever been to women's football, and we started chatting to them, and then we told them they must come to the patch afterwards because Meg Jones is going to be on the stage with the drag queen DJing after the match. So there's quite an advocacy-led level of like fan-to-fan kind of peer-based influence that happens the whole time. These people are not showing up transactionally paying for an experience, sitting there going, well, this isn't good enough. They're really actively participating in what the experience looks and feels like for the people around them. And what England Rugby is doing is they are letting players create experiences for fans. So if Maro Itoje, after the first round of the Men's Six Nations, went down to the Cabbage Patch and hosted a party like doing karaoke with a drag queen on the stage and a full lot of people when there's still 4 rounds of the championship to play, I think there would have been a small meltdown. Pretty much everywhere in this country. But in the women's game, it's very welcomed and celebrated, even at, like, relatively speaking, the highest levels of the game, from a rights holder perspective, that they want these players out there and they want to let the players define what this looks like. Now, if you went to that party, it was people in their 20s getting on it. That was definitely a very split demographic, male, female, but they were very young. But I wouldn't say that the whole stadium is that. The whole stadium is not a drag brunch.
That's interesting. I mean, obviously the English player Ellie,
Ellie
with her
Kildare.
cowboy hat and
Yeah.
all that, she's become quite a center point as well. And yeah, no, it sounds interesting, because you would think that with the English rugby that there's sponsorship everywhere now, that people are throwing money at the game, but it sounds like in South Africa you think there's still a big opportunity.
Huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Danny, go over to you.
Yeah, just a broader question. The one thing with the women's game at the moment that I see is you've got a big disparity between the full-time professionals
Yes.
and the part-timers. And that tends to skew the watching experience, if you like, because you've
Yeah.
got full-timers against part-timers,
Yeah.
it skews it.
Yeah.
What's the plans to actually professionalize the whole playing field?
Well, the plan is to tell more stories and show more people who these women are and equip the average viewer with a greater understanding of the fact that one of the girls who plays with Natasha Hunt at Gloucester Hartbury works at the local constabulary, and she would work night shift, sleep on the bus on the way to the match, and scrum against England internationals on the opposing side. And so that when you turn up to watch the match and you've bought a ticket, you're understanding that this is the background that these players come into the space with. We're definitely not there. It's not a fully professional product at club level anyway. At international level, it's closer. But it's going to require the private sector stepping up. And I've posted about this ad nauseum on my, if you follow me, sorry, you're going to hear it again, but no one expected men's rugby in the 90s to build itself this way. No one said to men's rugby, we will pay you a salary once you're competitive. The investment that flooded into the men's game when it professionalized was given wholly, and players were put on salaries en masse and said, okay, well, now we'll figure out how the professionalism element works. There is a structural level of inequality that happens in society, and unfortunately, this is the reality for female athletes across a variety of different sporting codes. But I think that we need owners in the game who are willing to professionalize the women's game in order for the match to be fully professional as well. And that requires a level of investment that we are not seeing, not even in England yet. But no one expected men's rugby. There are so many examples of sports making massive losses, football making massive losses, motorsport making massive losses, men's rugby, not a single Prem rugby club declared a plus on their balance sheet at the end of the previous season. And people don't look at those businesses as bad investments because they go, I'm growing equity here. It's fine. I'm still ahead, or I'm really passionate about this product. So I would love to see more of the private sector stepping into that space at club level, because the unions can only run this, South Africa, Scotland, Wales, England can only run a fully pro national program, but they can't put, like your entire club player body on a central program, which is what they're to a certain extent trying to do in South Africa, because there isn't a lot of commercial support yet for a franchise-based system. And so they're really trying to pretty much centralize the whole thing, but that would never be competitive, not in the long term.
It's not even competitive in the Prem. We've seen Wasps and Worcester disappear very quickly.
But the audience doesn't show up expecting competitiveness. The audience shows up for the women, So after that Scotland match, we did an interview with one of the props, Elma Smit at Scotland and at Scottish Rugby, and I said to her, "I'm not going to ask you anything. Into the camera, tell the people, the 30,498 people who bought tickets, what do you want to say to them?" And she said, "We are so sorry. We are going to earn back all of the trust and faith that you put into us by coming here today. We will earn it back." And we had a raft of comments, like hundreds and hundreds of comments on that asset, of people saying, "You have earned it already. We will keep turning up until you guys are paid the same way that England are paid." This is what fans are saying. Fans are saying, I will keep buying this ticket. I will keep turning up until there is equity, until you guys are resourced the way that you should be. Which is what I'm saying about that advocacy-led fan thinking.
Absolutely.
Peter,
It's a good product.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Danny. Peter, over to you. Peter, and then Sven, and then we'll have to do a little bit of networking, because all I want you to network about this afterwards is planning how you are going to get to the Wales game. That's all I want to know.
Brilliant.
Right. Yeah, so Peter, go for it.
I'd like to ask you that. I mean, I follow the women's football a lot, and it's amazing. I mean, Chelsea used to play in a small ground capacity 3,000. Next season, they're going to play every game at the men's stadium, Stamford Bridge.
Yeah.
We go to Arsenal. Arsenal, a similar story. They now fill the Emirates Stadium with 50, 60,000 supporters. What we love is that it's a better product than the men's game. You don't have obscene chanting. You don't. Families are not segregated.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing that worries us, and you mentioned the word equity, that as the game grows, are the sort of the horrible habits of time wasting and writhing around and fouling. Because at the moment, the women's game is competitive, but it's nice. It's played in a good atmosphere, and our fear is that as it gets bigger, do some of those cynical tactics creep in? I just wonder what your experience from women's rugby is, perhaps.
I think that as South Africans, we know that the impossible can happen every day because we've seen it in our lives and in our personal experiences. We all have, stories that we can recount to people about the world that we used to live in and the way that it looks now and how things have, literally just flipped over completely. I always say to people here in meetings that I think that there is way too much of an acceptance of things being a certain way because it's somehow preordained that it's always going to be this way. We can change like what the character of a game is. We can change the character of a sport. We can change the way in which we show up as members of the audience and take ownership of the space. But like you are doing, showing up as part of the SACC, you're taking ownership and going, well, actually, I'm going to use my time in this way. I think sports need to take responsibility for the way in which culture is built through age grade, through club rugby and football, and at international level. And I'm really proud of the work that we're doing in women's rugby around body positivity, inclusivity, the way that we are directly addressing bullying and misogyny head on and saying, these are not our standards. This is not where we sit. Off the record, I told someone recently that I was really reassured by the fact that that England Rugby and the RFU are doing work to address misogyny head on, because in many contexts outside of this country, if you went to a journalist with a story about rife misogyny in a rugby context, they wouldn't deem it newsworthy. They wouldn't think that it's worth writing about because people are going to go, yeah, not surprised. So it's really important for us to set the standard and say to one another, these are the non-negotiables for us. But I don't think that we're doing that enough in the men's game. People just go, I don't like this product, so I'm going to go shop somewhere else. So we have an opportunity in women's sport to keep ourselves more accountable for longer.
Sven, over to you.
Yeah, once again, thanks, Elma. It was great. It's been wonderful to have you on the Ubuntu call. Just from a chamber perspective, I mean, one of our drivers is, women, and so women's sport is fantastic. And also when I do talk to new members, one of the things I would like to have is ideas about where we can push sponsorship type ideas. So let's definitely take this offline and see what we can do, because we do have certain corporates who do actually want women focused led. So more than happy to see how we can package it as part of our offering and say, like, we've got events, we've got something happening, and so that'd be wonderful. So we can definitely connect after this properly.
Love that. Brilliant.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much. And I just remembered when we were talking about the Black Ferns, I do remember us crying together on that match in Exeter, because I think that because I'd obviously seen you on Instagram, so I knew exactly what you looked like, right? You had no idea who I was at all.
Yeah.
I was just there with a giant. I thought I was ordering a pint of beer, but it turned out to be 2 pints of beer. I didn't realize beers like that large existed. Okay. But I was just there because it was such when they were all in the pitch together, and that kind of ties into that culture, that feeling. And, I really felt that women's game showed us what we want to be like as a world, as a society, all those good things. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about that moment. And anyway, you were crying and I was crying and we were hugging, and it was all brilliant. I mean, so sorry about that, but I'm so delighted that even though that happened, you are here today.
Wow.
And you've given us such an inspirational talk. And now there's like 5 minutes left for networking. But as I said, all I want to find out from you is how you're going to support women's sports, or how you're getting to that game. That's all I'm interested in. So have a lovely time in your breakout rooms. And we'll see you shortly back for a lovely surprise music play out at the end. Thank you.